Hi, I've clicked onto the Global Tropical RE for December the 12th, 2023. As is always the case in these videos, the thought expression are run alone, and when making decisions ahead of any tropical cyclones, look to your local weather office, local emergency management, and local tropical cyclone warning center. So we've got one system active across the tropics today. We've got Tropical Cyclone Jasper here as it sits off the coastline of Queensland and Australia, though it won't be making landfall for at least another 24 hours, maybe even more. But the system has had a lot happen to it since my last video. When I made my last video, the system was getting heavily sheared, and now the system is out of the wind shear and is now likely trying to re-strengthen some. But the system did struggle a lot in the face of that shear. It completely lost its old inner core structure that is gone, and this time yesterday it had no thunderstorm activity associated with it. It was completely void of any convection. Obviously that has now changed, and that makes sense because the environment is more favorable. You can see this in the microwave pass, or sorry, not the microwave pass, the water vapor loop, with all this convection blowing up, and we have outflow expanding to the north in an anticyclonic or counterclockwise fashion. So this shows the environment is more favorable, and this is exactly what models had expected. This is a 200 millibar flow plot from the GFS, and what has been happening over the past day is an upper ridge over more northern north central Australia has been moving east and is now moving over Jasper, and this will make for a favorable environment, which will likely allow some intensification before landfall sometime tomorrow local time. Now, the system is not set up to intensify rapidly. That's some of the good news here, and what's really one of the good news with the shear, it completely disrupted the inner core structure. So now I would have to completely rebuild it to have any chance of significantly intensifying. You can see in the microwave pass that we don't really have an inner core structure being built. We mainly just have this blob of thunderstorm activity. Now, it's possible that this system does attempt to rebuild an inner core structure as it comes towards the coastline. But the good news is here, it takes time. And I don't see much of a scenario where the system would intensify rapidly prior to landfall. We may, if it does build an inner core structure right before landfall, if it doesn't start to entrain some continental dry air, but we could see maybe an increased rate of intensification. But other than that, I don't see much room for significant intensification here. But regardless of that, there will still be the chance of significant rainfall and wind impacts here, and alongside that, significant storm surge impacts. This is the current forecast from the Bureau of Meteorology. You can see coming in as a Category 2 cyclone sometime tomorrow afternoon, local time. And you could see a cyclone warning in place from Cape Flattery down to Townsville, and a cyclone watch further inland from about Cape Melville down to Palmerville and areas further south. But you can see weakening taking place as the system comes ashore down to a tropical low as the system moves into more central North Queensland. And then there will be the potential for the system to redevelop in the Gulf of Carpentaria, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. But in terms of impacts, this system will have the potential to bring significant winds of Category 2 strength. You can see the significant wind fields here on its forecast. Now, there is still some uncertainty on exactly how far north or south it will be when it comes in. If it does come in a little bit further north, say closer to Cooktown, you could have some of the more worst winds in areas like Cooktown and Cape Flattery, whereas if it comes south, you'd shift the most significant winds to areas like Port Douglas or points south. Now, another aspect of the track is if the system does come a little bit further north, you could maximize the storm surge in areas such as Port Douglas. And areas further south, if the storm comes in, say around Port Douglas, you could maximize the storm surge in areas, say as far south as Cardwell, especially. And where this part of the coastline sort of caves in, this might be a bigger concern for you all, as you will now just have that water trying to funnel into this part of the coastline, and that may be of significant concern. Now, the good news is here, this isn't a powerful cyclone. This isn't, a Category 4 or Category 5 coming in here, so the storm surge shouldn't be extremely high, but there will still be likely some water rises here along the coastline, and it's important that you stay tuned to local emergency management and the Bureau of Meteorology for what you should do ahead of time. Now, in terms of rainfall, that will not be just a coastal issue. That will also move across Queensland. And you can see here, these are some of the hazards from the Bureau of Meteorology, talking about rainfall of potentially 100 to 150 millimeters in 6 hours. So it's a 6 hourly total. So that could be very significant flooding there with a lot of rainfall in a very short period of time. But overall rainfall from this event could be, 150 to 250 millimeters, potentially upwards of 350 millimeters. And some models have even tried to go higher than 350 millimeters of rain. So we may have some significant flooding to deal with here as the system comes through. Now, I want to go through the Bureau of Meteorology website just as a reminder of what you can do to go to find this information that I just showed you and find these forecast cones. For Jasper particularly, you click on this tropical cyclone header at the beginning of the page, and then you click on this header here, and you can click onto the forecast map. That will take you to this forecast cone and tropical cyclone advice. This will give you all the hazards alongside giving you recommended actions, telling you when they're going to issue the next one, and also tell you where the watch and warning zones are. Now, I talked about how we may have to watch the system go into the Gulf of Carpentaria, and we'll have to see if it does remain a tropical cyclone or become a tropical cyclone again there. This has changed a little bit. If you remember, I talked about the GFS model and how it was a bit more keen on that idea. GFS has been more of a model to back off on this idea, and it's actually very weak with the system. And I'll show you this here. So the system is going to come into Queensland sometime tomorrow, but then it's going to continue tracking into the Gulf of Carpentaria, likely a cause of two factors. We have a ridge here over central Australia. This is going to continue tracking the system west, but also the system is going to be embedded within this larger sort of gyre, if you will, of low pressure. You can see that here in the vorticity plot. We have this broad area of low pressure. It's sort of on the southeastern side. So you can see in the track on the GFS, it sort of bends down as it sort of goes on the southern periphery of this gyre. And the system's overall center does not stay overly strong on the GFS here. So it really does not have a chance to develop, as I'd imagine it has not too much time, as it does move pretty quickly, Gulf of Carpentaria, but also it has to contend with this larger gyre here north of it. So that may be a reason why the system didn't form on the GFS anymore. Now, the European is a little bit different. It does keep the system center intact. It still has it getting in trained with this little gyre, if you will, north of the system, though the system center stays stronger as it comes over the the Queensland coastline, and it does remain a tropical cyclone as it goes to the Gulf of Carpentaria. But we don't see significant strengthening on the European. It doesn't look like we're going to be seeing much room for significant intensification. One reason for that would be that the system will likely be disrupted in any fashion, whether the GFS or European scenario verifies. It will likely be disrupted somewhat going through the coastline of Queensland, and that will likely have the storm need a period of, redevelopment, or a chance to reorient itself, if you will, in the Gulf of Carpentaria. And that phase typically takes, about half a day to maybe a day in some cases with these systems coming through. And that half a day could be, half of its time over the Gulf of Carpentaria. So once it actually gets itself back to itself where it's ready to intensify, it may not have too much time to. And that's, of course, good news. We don't want a system rapidly intensifying. But you can see on the European, the system doesn't weaken really until it gets into the northern territories. But even then, it starts to have more of a brown ocean effect type deal going on, where it does intensify over land, which that could be a possibility. But we're past 7 days at this point, so not a bit of uncertainty there. But the general idea here is that we will have the potential for some redevelopment to take place, or just have a tropical cyclone move into the Gulf of Carpentaria if the European solution verifies. But that could increase some wind impacts if it is a tropical cyclone in the Gulf of Carpentaria. But regardless of that, there will likely be heavy rainfall moving into the northern territories as the system does come through. And if this system does end up weaker, like on the GFS with this larger gyre, the GFS has been trying to suggest that this gyre in general will move westwards and then could develop off the coastline of Western Australia. Whether or not that actually happens, not sure. That is past 7 days, and we'll have to see exactly how that pans out. But certainly it will be an interesting future with either Jasper or ex-Jasper as it continues to move west. And last thing I'll show you was the probabilities of tropical cyclone activity from the Bureau of Meteorology. You can see here coming in by tomorrow afternoon in the central Queensland coastline, but then moving into the Gulf of Carpentaria, and they're giving it a moderate chance of redevelopment right now. And then you see the area of development sort of expand westwards as we looked with the European as it moved into the Northern Territories. And of course, like I said, lots of uncertainty after this point. So you just have to stay tuned to the Bureau of Meteorology, and I'll continue to have videos on this as it does continue to move west. But that's all that I've got for now. The tropics across the rest of the world are pretty quiet. We may have to touch on the West Pacific later this week, but right now things are pretty quiet there. But I'll leave you all with the forecast cone. I will leave a link to the Bureau of Meteorology website in the description, so you can go to the cyclone warning page and the advice page that I showed you with all the rainfall forecasts. But stay safe in Australia as the system does come through, and I'll have future videos later this week on the storm. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching.